Ghost Town. The trees swayed in the breeze, each branch's leaves brushing against one another in gentle harmony. It was a beautiful day towards the end of summer. The breeze was cool. It felt good on Troy's face. Sitting in the shade of a large cedar tree, he felt very at peace with himself, and even the birds chirping seemed to have something to be happy about. Maybe they felt the same way as he did. Maybe that's all it really took. His hands in front of him, he stared downwards and then looked up to gaze upon the windy path in front of him, which he had taken to reach the bench he was now sitting on. He was in a large park, and there were trees like the one he was sitting under everywhere, as well as other amenities and various sporting areas. The park was in a nice, calm, well-mannered location. It was only one of three other parks just like it. In fact, the entire town and surrounding counties were all very well established, upper-middle-class areas. Only doctors and lawyers and the like seemed to have a place in this place, Troy had often thought to himself, and some entrepreneurs. He figured that's what his place in a place like this would be. Maybe he would start a business, maybe he would go on to do something worthwhile, or not. Either way, he had to figure it out. He was out of school now and had been for the entire summer. He had opted not to go to college, though he could easily have gone to one of the local schools. His grades were high enough and he lived nearby. It would be convenient at the very least. But no, not he had decided. Not yet. The interesting thing about the town he lived in, Preston, or the most interesting thing to Troy, was the town's local ghost town, which was an area of town unoccupied, which nobody ever visited. Troy often did, however. In fact, he spent a lot of time there lately. He was thinking about it now, wondering if he might take himself to it today to take some photos. He thought it was beautiful in a dreary, lonely sort of way. Unlike most people, he wasn't afraid of it, and his knack for photography only made his tendency to visit the site more likely. He'd already taken over 100 photos there, as currently it was his favorite photo site, although he couldn't put his finger on why he liked the place so much as of late, or didn't want to. He had a suspicion that it had something to do with the recent untimely death of his younger sister, Nina. She'd been 16, only 2 years younger than Troy, very bright and beautiful. Troy had always taken the burden of looking out for her, as she had been a somewhat naive girl, despite her other qualities. She'd been very trusting, rather. Troy was not. He wished she'd been more aware. He wished he'd been there for her more often. Thinking about her now, a small tear ran down his cheek. He quickly wiped it away, stood up, and started his way towards Ghost Town. Walking the quickest route to the place, he checked his phone. By the time he got to the abandoned town, though it was too small to really be a town, he would have probably an hour or so until nightfall. That was all right, he thought, as he had a flashlight in his backpack. His camera was in there too, so he wouldn't have to make a trip home. That would give him more time to take photos, and he supposed that he could stay there a while after dark. The place had no streetlights. In fact, it had no lights to speak of at all, but his camera did have a flash, and he supposed that he could get some darkly beautiful pictures of the place with it after dark. Yeah, he thought to himself, it would be a good idea to stay after dark. After all, the benefits outweighed the risks. Worst case scenario would be to meet a hobo who would ask him for money, which he would decline to give, and that would be that. He dealt with homeless people there before. They were the only ones, besides himself, who seemed not to be afraid of the place. Or maybe they were, but had no choice. He felt bad for them, but he knew he couldn't do much for them. So he let them be, and they let him be. He hoped one wouldn't try to rob him. Actually, thinking about it now, he wondered if he should turn back and return later on, but now that he'd thought of it, he really wanted to take pictures there after dark. He had to go, despite the risk. Besides, it was probably going to be fine. He laughed to himself at how paranoid he was being. If Nina were here, she'd go immediately, he sighed. Maybe I'm becoming more like her. He continued to walk along the route there at a steady pace. He watched the sun at intervals as it sank lower and lower in the sky. He knew that it would be dark, and he wanted to go there before then. After all, he still had some daylight pictures to take, and he'd never gotten any shots at twilight. He tried to picture where the sun would be when he took his first shot, wondering how it would look, but he couldn't remember which side of the town the sun fell on. He thought it odd that he couldn't recall that piece of fairly simple information, but for the life of him he couldn't picture it. Nearing his destination, he concluded that he would soon find out. When he arrived, there was no one to be seen. It was quiet, and no birds chirped their songs like at the park. Everything, if there was anything, was asleep, and he was the only one awake, alone. He liked that, odd as he thought it may sound to some, being alone. Ever since Nina's He tried to stop thinking about it and took out his camera from his pack, a stylish, brand new navy blue pack, the name of which he didn't care to remember. It had 2 long straps that ran down the back of it, which secured the contents of his bag, each a light tan. The colors contrasted well with the backpack's blue, and he accrued a strange satisfaction from looking at it. Setting it down next to the nearest old, decrepit building, he stood back and flashed a picture of it. It was a good shot, a pack with the old building in the background of it. It made it seem as if it might have been worn by some weary traveler, set down there for a moment as he went to explore the building. Troy liked that image. He might even use it. He thought to himself that he might even use it as his computer background. Once he uploaded all of the pictures he would inevitably take, though he was very choosy about which pictures to keep, and he only took a handful each time he came to this place. There was something special about it, and he didn't want to take any bad shots, so he was careful and only took the few he knew would be good. Photography had been a hobby that he hadn't expected to pick up. He'd had no interest in it before Nina had died, but soon after he found himself ordering the Canon EOS Rebel. Expensive as could be, but not a problem for him. To Troy, when he wanted something to accomplish something, especially something creative, money was no matter. Still, photography had been a surprise to him. He hadn't expected to get so wrapped up in it, but he had, taking up to 500 or even 1,000 pictures in a single day of shooting. He had other creative hobbies as well, like drawing, painting, sculpting, and even wrote a bit of poetry. He was very artistic. Nina had been too. His mother, however, wasn't creative at all. At least, not in the sense that she ever pursued any artistic ventures. She was a lawyer, very straight to the point, very smart and precise. Troy supposed that he and Nina had been more like their father, who had been an entrepreneur of sorts, though Troy didn't actually know what he did or had done. His mother had never told him, and she never spoke of him except on very rare occasions. That was something that Troy felt he, and Nina especially, had missed out on, but there was nothing to do about it now. Now he just took photos. Troy sighed, a spark of excitement igniting in him. Almost dark, he smiled. Where should I start? He looked around, turning this way and that for a time, finally focusing his attention on an old 2-story building. He didn't know what it used to be, but it had glass windows along its side, and it was very long. Some of the windows were broken and some were open, but most were closed and still intact. Old and smudged, impossible to see through from the outside. He focused his camera to take a shot, but decided against it. He retrieved his flashlight from his pack, a tool he often kept with him for exploration of new sites after dark, though he wasn't normally visiting places that were so abandoned. He slung his pack over his shoulders. Let's go in, he nodded. Yeah. The sun was nearly gone now, with only a bit of light left in the day. He went ahead and turned on his flashlight, walking closer to the building. By the time he approached the door, the sun was nearly gone. It was only a few minutes of rummaging throughout the hallway inside before it was completely gone, and night enveloped. There was no moon this night, and the cool breeze that earlier comforted Troy rolled in through the broken and open windows of the building and began to give him a chill. Rubbing his arm, he held on to his camera with one hand and flashlight with the other. He thought that he was on quite the adventure for someone only trying to get a couple snapshots of something. The effort almost didn't seem worth it, but it was to him. He couldn't explain why. He could see a myriad of rooms down the way. Walking down the hallway, he turned the flashlight into one of the many rooms, revealing old machines covered in dust and grime. Miscellaneous parts littered the floor of the room, making it difficult for Troy to meander around it. He wandered carefully around each and every part, large and small, some of which he thought he recognized, though he actually didn't, and some of which he had no idea what they could be. It was an interesting place, however, and he took a few shots of the machines, as they were obviously very old and intricate, making them good photo material. They appeared to develop well on the camera itself, and Troy hoped that they would be the same on his computer later on. Wandering back outside of the room, he turned his flashlight down the hall. It was empty, of course, with no sound to be heard. Silent. Wait, said Troy just before he heard a loud crash. It had been odd, as if he had sensed it coming, though maybe he would have had that feeling, crash or no crash. Either way, he had to check it out. I think it came from down the hall, he spoke softly to himself. All right, let's go. Stepping lightly down the hall, he passed various rooms, shining his flashlight in each of them, but spotting nothing. Once he reached the end of the hallway, he turned to the right and pointed his flashlight down the rest of the hallway, noting that there was a door to the left. It was open, though so were the other ones. Despite this fact, Troy had a sneaking suspicion that whatever had made the sound was probably in that room. He edged carefully towards the door. When he was close enough, he shined the flashlight into it. Immediately, he jumped back. "Get that thing out of my eyes!" yelled the man with the long, scraggly beard. "Sorry," Troy stuttered, backing away and turning back down the hallway. He walked quickly towards the exit and left. It had been a homeless man. Troy suspected that he must have knocked something over while he was looking for a place to lie down and sleep. Troy put his hands on his head and sighed. It was a relief that that's all it had been, but scary at the same time. Just some homeless man, nothing more. Troy didn't know what he had been expecting, but it wasn't that. How stupid it was of him to go looking after that sound, Troy thought to himself. It was very much unlike him to throw caution to the wind like that and do something so reckless. It could have been anything. It's what Nina would have done. Maybe that's why he was acting like this. Maybe that's why he was in Preston's local ghost town taking pictures of nothing important. He walked out of the little town and made his way back to the street he'd come by. When he finally arrived home, he was eager to upload the photos that he had managed to take while he was there. Part of himself wished he'd taken more, but with the homeless man there at night, he hadn't wanted to stick around any longer than he had to. When he went inside, his mother was nowhere to be found. She was probably working late on a case about who knew what. It wasn't important. Troy sprinted up the stairs into his room, grabbed the cord that connected his camera to his computer, and began to upload the photos he had taken. He sat back and let them upload, waiting for the process to finish so that he could take a look before going to bed. When they were finally done, he opened the files and took a peek. "What?" he said to himself, confused and a little spooked. Except for the photo of the backpack, every photo, the photo of the machines on the floor of the room, had a ghoulish image in it. It looked like a person, but all white, and was that Nina?